You're inside the Easy Skanking. My name is Kshema Francis, and you and I will be skanking sweet until 2. But right now, it's all about Road to Success, the journey, a feature inside the Easy Skanking that is geared to inspire, uplift, educate, motivate, and entertain. And today on the Road to Success, the journey, I'm going to give you a little profile. A senior executive in the BPO and transformation space with over 20 years of entrepreneurial experience, Odetta Rockhead Kerr is the former country head and vice president at Sutherland Jamaica, a subsidiary of Sutherland Global Services. She led the charge in establishing an award-winning business model where students of UWI are employed at the Sutherland UWI location. Philanthropic initiatives that certify close to 2,000 youths with Microsoft literacy and education intervention program are among other initiatives she has led. Prior to Sutherland, she spent 15 years at Xerox and managed operations in Jamaica, Africa, the US, and the Dominican Republic and Mexico. With significant management experience overseeing large Fortune 500 client portfolios, Odetta Rockhead Kerr is an author and publisher, entrepreneur, founder, and CEO of GOFFAH Global. She's also a speaker and mindset coach. Today on the Road to Success, we journey with Odetta Rockhead Kerr. On the Road to Success, Odetta, welcome. I'm not hearing you there, but I'm seeing you. You are looking absolutely gorgeous.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me, and good evening, or I should say good day, everyone.
All right, we're really happy that you're able to take the time out of your busy schedule. We know how it is for you to take us on your journey and sharing with us today your rich story that we're hoping to get some gems from. I'm sure we will. But Odetta, let's go back to where it all began. What was your childhood like growing up in rural Jamaica?
So I grew up in a place called Plumtree, and it's because there's a lot of plum tree there. And my childhood was an extremely happy childhood. I had a loving extended family that I grew up with, amazing neighbors, and just very spirited people in that community. And it was the energy from everybody was so intoxicating that I don't know if it blinded me to the reality of what was happening outside of my world, but I did not know I was poor. I had no idea that when measured up to anybody else, I would be considered poor. But in general, it was a very happy childhood. Things happened along the way that made it a little bit tragic, but all my memories from I'd say before 15 years old are extremely pleasant. And those are some of the memories that I go back to every day to keep me grounded.
All right, and we're gonna get into all of it. But how would you describe your parents?
So my mother is also a teenage mother. So my grandmother, it's almost like a generational curse almost. My grandmother had her first child when she was 15. My mother had me when she was 17, and I had my first child when I was 17. But my mother is always working, always figuring out ways to make ends meet, especially in my late teenage years. Unfortunately, my father has had what you would call, he's infamous. He's had a lot of criminality around him. If you talk to the average person and ask them about my father, they'd tell you he was a bad man. And then you talk to another person and they'll say he was Robin Hood. I got so much from him and he gave so much to the community. But I've heard enough to know that my father wasn't an innocent man. And he's been to jail for criminality many times. As a matter of fact, in my book, I talk about when I went missing as a child, I was reported missing because he ended up in jail. And eventually, by age 6, I lost my father as he was trying to escaped the authorities. He shot himself in the scrotum and bled to death. And his life of crime had an interesting impact on me. One, I was somewhat ashamed of it, especially when I was younger. But then I realized in this life, you don't get to choose your parents. And there is a reason why God chose my father for me. And I believe, many of his genes, and I am very proud to be his daughter. So my parents met when my father was 10 years older than my mother. They met, they created me, and unfortunately, I didn't get to enjoy both of them, one by choice. But I'm nevertheless very grateful. And like I said, no regrets, just lessons.
Wow. No, many people, Odetta, would not be able to overcome most of what you encountered as a teenager. Between the ages of 15 and 17 years was a dark period of your life. What did you encounter, and how did you find the strength to turn trauma into resilience?
Well, what happened? I think a lot of it started with the death of my grandmother. See, my grandmother, after my father died, I was raised by an extended family. My grandmother and my grandfather are primarily who I dedicate my life story to. And living in a household, there was a number of us in the old board house in Plumtree. And living in that household, you became so attached to your grandparents that you couldn't perceive life without them. And unfortunately, my grandmother contracted both hypertension and diabetes. And she was very prone to stress, and she ended up getting a stroke that left her crippled. And unfortunately, and this was my first reality into poverty. We could not afford just a stroke. We couldn't afford the medication nor the therapy to keep her alive. And I sat there day after day and watched my grandmother dwindle away and die. And let me tell you something. When you talk about heartbreak, this woman did everything for me. She raised me literally and exposed me to a lot of things that I talk about in general. And to watch her die that way, it leaves a hole in your chest that to this day, every time I read my own book and read the part about my grandmother, I still end up crying. And I think her death triggered a series of behavior. Now, I don't do the blame game, so I'm not saying her death is why I did what I did, but I think it made me more naive and more needy as an individual. And unfortunately, while in high school, a family friend, well, the boss of a family member, I started going to his house because it was a convenient arrangement. My family member worked for him and was a driver. And I was attending Mount Alvernia High School, which was 12 miles away. Plus, I had to walk for an hour to go home. So it was convenient that after school, my family member would pick me up sometimes. I would wait at his house until my family member was done working, and then he would take us home together. Well, that's the unfortunate thing that happens in cases where you trust someone who shouldn't be trusted. Because what happened over time was this man who was way in his 40s when it started at age 15, started to touch me occasionally. He had a computer, which I would use for my homework. He was very smart. He was an accountant. And in the past, I would leverage him to learn more or to use his computer before I got home. And he took advantage of that situation. He would touch me, and I did not say anything. And it's funny how when it's happening, you're supposed to say something, but you never do. And unfortunately, it kept happening for some time until eventually he got impatient and held me down and raped me. And after being raped, it resulted
Take your time.
You know, you write about this so many times, you talk about it so many times, but it does not change the impact it has on you. So it resulted in me being pregnant. Of course, I was 15. And at the time, my family made a decision to have me do an abortion. And let the record show that if that decision were mine to be made, I would have made the same one, because I have so much
Mm-hmm.
respect for women who carry a child that's born out of violence, but I'm just not that person, and I'm not going to fool myself. So I ended up doing an abortion. We took the matter to the police. Eventually, we didn't proceed in court based on what was happening, and I tried to move on with my life from that point. And it was at that time that I realized that I had turned into this person that really didn't love myself, really didn't love life anymore. My morals, to some extent, were skewed and completely deviated from how I was raised and the principles that I was raised with. And it had somewhat of an impact on me, because in less than a year, I had dropped out of college and was pregnant again. That's twice before I was 17. But this time, nobody could convince me to do an abortion, because after that abortion, I was certain I was not going to be pregnant again. So this was my miracle child. So there lies the tragedy that I would say pushed me to get to where I needed to go, because my son's birth gave me life. It
Mm-hmm.
taught me self love. It taught me confidence. He was the reason why I now had to succeed. Success was no longer optional. I now had a human being to take care of. So his life, I believe, is what gave me everything to achieve what I've been able to as of this point in time.
Wow. Talk about strength, Odetta. You briefly mentioned dropping out of high school and college. What steps did you take to ensure that these outcomes did not define who you are or who you can become?
Well, first, I didn't graduate from high school. And, that's my first lesson I learned around quitting, because when I realized I wasn't going to graduate, I had to quickly figure out how I was going to achieve all the things that I'd slated or had on my to do. Because one of my first big dream was at age 11, and it was during Hurricane Gilbert. And we lived in an old board house with so many holes in the roof and, rotten flooring board, that, Gilbert coming up, we were sure we were going to lose our house. But my grandmother kept praying and kept praying. And to this day, it has to be a miracle, because our house was more fragile than every other one that was destroyed in our community, but ours stayed intact. But in that moment, as I was there setting pots and pans to catch the water from the holes in the ceiling, I made a promise to myself that I was going to knock down this old board house and build a mansion for my family. So, going back to the question you asked now, not graduating from high school, I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to build a mansion if I don't even graduate from high school, right? I had to either
Mm-hmm.
decide to find a man to help me, which, as I say in my book, I started to harbor a gold digger mindset, or I have to rely on me and become my hero, my own hero, that is, in my story. So I started to inquire about what not graduating from high school would mean to my future. And I ran into a lecturer at the college that I wanted to attend, and he said, you don't have to graduate, you just need to have the subjects. So what I did, I was harboring all kind of thoughts about quitting, and quickly I rebounced and thought, okay, there's actually a way. And what I learned from that lesson is, there are going to be many times, or that experience, I should say, there are going to be many times in our life when quitting is the easiest thing to do. And we tend to get, to relax ourselves into our new normal. But all I have to say is quitting is never and should never be an option, because there's always something out there that's better than quitting. So I decided to aggressively study for those exams, got them, and was able to get into college. But again, got into college, still wasn't so clear, and got pregnant, got dropped out of college. And listen, let me tell you, when you talk about self-love, my mother, or I should say my family, borrowed the money for me to do the abortion because we don't have no money. She borrowed the money for me to go to college. We don't have no money to pay the school fee. And I turn around with my ingratitude and get pregnant, drop out, and this is twice before 17, drop out and have no clue what I'm gonna do. But you see, my son became my why. And as soon as I dropped out and he was born and I held him in my arms for the first time, the power that I felt from just looking into that child's face and realizing that I had made the decision to give birth to this child before, or when I wasn't ready or capable of taking care of that child. So I had a responsibility to do right by this child and ensure that he's not short of anything. I decided I'm going to get a job. Ended up getting a job by chance in the BPO industry. But this job was in the accounting department, where I saw people's salaries. And when I saw the salary of expatriates, there were very few, if any at all, Jamaican managers working in there. I thought, this is exactly what I want to do. I don't know what they do, but the money here I want, because this can build a house, it can take care of my son, it can do everything what I need to do. And I started to stay behind to learn and all of that. And I reapplied and went back to the same college. But this time around, there was no babies that were going to come. And it was a serious matter. And when I left, I even surprised myself. I was valedictorian student of the year, most outstanding student in my course of study. And I re-entered and went back for the job of the manager whose pay I saw. And again, you're thrown another curveball and you have to navigate. But I didn't allow anything to stop me, which is why by age 25, I was a vice president in a US Fortune 500 company, breaking many records that, nobody had accomplished before.
And let us talk about that, because like you said, at age 25 you made history in corporate America and changed the generational trajectory of your family. Share with us these phenomenal achievements and what was most influential in your financial decisions as a young woman from humble beginnings.
Well, it's interesting because when you're from humble beginnings and you're from a family like mine, there's not a lot of ego in the matter, right? So I was a hustler as far back as I can remember. And when I say hustler, when I was a child, my grandmother helped to facilitate my first hustle. What she did was she baked a cake. She helped me to bake a cake that we iced together. And I used my exercise book, the double line exercise book, and used my markers and everything and created raffle tickets and sold it to students, fellow students, to people in my community for a chance to win that cake. And I made a lot of money. And that gave birth to a life of hustle. After that, I would host fun days and charge people. We came up with a way to watch TV and charge people to enter. So unfortunately, when I decided to go back to school, I couldn't afford it financially. So for the first year, I saved up enough from my job, but it for my full-time job, that is, it just wasn't making do. So in addition to my full-time job, I took on a weekend job at Water Fletcher Beach in Montego Bay, selling tickets to patrons And also I would do it on public holiday. And that paired with my full-time job was enough money for me to pay my first year tuition, but it's 3 years. So start before you're ready is my biggest philosophy. I wasn't going to wait until I have 3 years tuition to start. Decided to enter. And when I got there, I thought, how am I going to pay for the next 2 years? And what I had to do was, because I was excelling scholastically, my lecturers recognized and recommended me for a scholarship, and it was the Courts Junior Management Scholarship. And with this scholarship, I was able to, it was a competition competing with colleges and universities across the island. And I was able to stand out and become the winner. And I got tuition for second year. And it also gave me an internship that summer at Courts that paid a decent stipend as well. But I still had year 3 left. And then I lost my job at Walter Fletcher because they divested. So to figure out year 3 now, I had to draw back on that hustler mentality. And my mother was a lab technician. She processed photographs, and she had given me a camera when I was younger. And what I did, this was long before digital camera. So by taking pictures and offering same day or 24 hours turnaround on your actual picture, back then was like gold. So I did that, and I charged people for photographs, and I was being hired all over the place to take photographs and to have them ready within 24 to 48 hours. And that money helped me to finish and, to get qualified. A lot of that, and, just the way I was raised, I found it intriguing, and I wanted to understand the discipline of getting to be financially free. When you have to hustle so much to make ends meet, and you have to make so many sacrifices to make ends meet, your biggest aspiration, or at least I should say my biggest aspiration, became financial freedom. I wanted freedom to do what I want, when I want, how I want. And again, this gave me the drive after becoming a vice president and putting things in place. I was able to explore things like, forex trading, quite a few things on my own. I taught myself a lot of things. I also started little businesses. I started a taxi company where I gave the person the taxi after 2 years of driving and bringing in the money. It turned into an empire. And these were young men in my community that were looking for opportunities. And I ended up with almost 10 drivers. And it was a success.
Into the details in terms of the phenomenal achievements, I want you to highlight them so people know that at age 25, you were able to build that dream house of which you speak, and your 6 figures and so much more. So I want you to show off and let us know at age 25 what you accomplished.
Okay. Well, going back to Hurricane Gilbert, an 11-year-old saying, I need to get my family out of this old dilapidated board house and put them into a nice concrete dwelling. And we're talking about 8 people. So it needs to be a big house because we can't be stumbling over each other. So when I left college the second time around and went back, I told them I was coming back for the management job, but I don't think they believed me, because when I went back, the position wasn't even offered to me. The gentleman said, you don't have the experience. He didn't tell me that, He said, go back to school and come back. But, life threw you another curveball. What you do? You focus on the goal. So when he said that, I decided to take the job that was being offered, and the pay was pathetic. But I knew what I wanted, and I was able to subsidize it with my regular hustle, and I kept pushing. And as I progressed, I got familiar with the employees. I actually loved what this is in BPO, so I absolutely loved what I was doing. I built up very strong relationships with the client, and I was aspiring for my manager's job because it was his paycheck that I saw about 4 years earlier, and I wanted it. Now, this was a paycheck that was in US dollars. It also included fully paid company vehicle, gas and all, apartment or house or townhouse in the best community that you could think of, and all the expenses related to that. So utilities and everything related to that covered, mobile device, healthcare. It was exorbitant. As a matter of fact, it was a six-figure US dollar income that I never thought people in Jamaica earned. And this is over 20 odd years ago, right?
Wow.
So I wanted his job because that's the only way I was going to get that pay. And I didn't want to replace him. I wanted to help him to grow so I could absorb his role and he could step into a bigger position. But God is working always in mysterious ways. And the then CEO of the company left and started another company. And this manager, we all knew, had allegiance to that CEO. So when that happened, I saw clear line of sight to the position, but still, life always throws curveballs. And it just wasn't happening. I got one promotion to supervisor and it just wasn't happening. So at the same time, Ritz-Carlton opened up in Montego Bay. And I decided to apply for a job at the Ritz-Carlton and I was successful. But my heart was with BPO. And although the Ritz-Carlton offer was going to pay 30% more, I loved what I was doing and I was torn. So I prayed about it, did my pros and cons list, and eventually I decided that I wasn't moving fast enough. By the way, this was still a year, but I love fast movement. And I'm going to tender my resignation, which I did. And the managing director at the time said, no, you can't leave because this account is at risk, especially if the gentleman and the manager who is in charge, who, by the way, I had a great relationship with, if he left and went somewhere else, we could potentially lose the client. So he said, I'm going to come back to you with a proposal and hopefully you will stay. I told him, go ahead. He came back. And let me tell you something. I learned a very valuable lesson at this point in time, that you could actually be desired and not valued. They wanted me to stay. They saw what I could do in retaining the clients and making the employees happy. But when he put that offer on the table, one, it paled in comparison to what the manager in the role was making. It was in Jamaican dollars, not the US that I'd seen. There was no car, there was no house, there was nothing. So, a few things were considered factors in why his compensation was so different from mine, right? He was an expatriate, he was Caucasian, he was a man, he was experienced. I was a woman from country, Black and inexperienced. But I didn't focus on those things because when you start focusing on the isms, you lose focus of the ultimate goal. So I ignore all those things. I don't care who him be. If he can make that salary for the same job that I'm being asked to do, I should be able to make it too. It's only fair. So I declined the offer. But I declined it with a heavy heart because I didn't accept it. I wanted to stay. I built so many good relationships with the staff there. To this day, I have great relationships with them. And this is over 20 odd years ago. And I wanted to stay and I didn't want to go to Ritz-Carlton. But sometimes you have to make decisions to preserve your integrity. And in that moment, it was the principle of the matter. So I told him no, I wasn't even going to negotiate because I could not allow someone who did not understand my worth to tell me what he thought I was valued. And that to me is what negotiating does when it comes to a salary. So he came back to me and said, okay, give me another hour or so. And it was a lot of back and forth, but eventually he said, give me another hour to call our head office, which was in Texas at the time, and to come back to me. I said, you have half an hour. And I pack up my things and with my handbag in my hand and going to his office because this was my last day to be in the office. Although I didn't accept the offer at Ritz yet because I was going to go on 3 weeks vacation before going. So he came back, he waffled around with another offer. I said, you know what? My patience has grown thin. And then eventually he came up, he stepped out of the room and came back and said, okay, we're going to give you the 6-figure compensation plan. You're going to get the US dollar salary. You're going to get the car. You're going to get the house, all the expenses. And he gave me it in writing, because unless it's in writing, it don't count. And he handed me that night a key to the company car. And listen, I didn't even have a driver's license. I didn't know how to drive. But you think I was going to give it back to him? I can figure that out after the fact. Again, you have to start before you're ready. Took the car, took the offer, and I went home and I was celebrating. And I remember telling my mother, and my mother is a huge motivator for me. And I'll tell you why. My mother actually kicked me out of the house after I was pregnant. And I was homeless for a little while, but I was taken in by my son's father and his mother. But, she had sacrificed so much for me that a part of what I always wanted to do was to show her that I'm the daughter that she knew she had. The daughter that when, in high school, I did so well in certain subjects that she would walk around and show the whole community my test grade. So I wanted her to be proud. And she was one of the first person I showed the offer. And she said, so you're gonna make more than the prime minister? And I laughed because that was her measurement of success. Remember, we're growing up in rural St. James, there's not much more that we're exposed to. And when she said that, I saw pride in her eyes and her demeanor, and I was happy. So now I was getting the salary. We're still living at the old board house by this. If you look in the book, you'll see a photograph or several photographs of that house with holes in the floor and all kind of things happening. And I had to achieve the goals I committed to at age 11. So decided to save up, made a lot of sacrifices. So this is me at age 22, right? I wasn't interested in going to the party, traveling over the seas. Remember, I was making a 6-figure US dollar salary. This is 20 odd years ago. I could have gone to any country, any amount of time and done anything with that money. I could shop until I was weak, but I chose not to because I had that goal. So I saved every dollar I earned, and I was traveling a lot for work. And I would get per diems. There wasn't any return required by company policy. So I would starve myself and save every dollar. And I kept on with my hustling. This time I was buying and selling. So when I traveled, I would shop and I would come back and sell from my vehicle. And this included me driving through rural St. James and selling clothes, shoes, and accessories from my vehicle because I had to get that money to build that house. And I didn't want to borrow it. Although initially I harbored the thought, but I thought to myself, if I borrowed it, somebody could take it away from us. And I couldn't afford for that to happen, right? So saved up all the money to start the house, had no idea how I was going to finish it. But again, you start before you're ready. Started the house. We, did the whole kill the goat, splash the blood, drink the manish water and everything. And we started building, hired workmen only from my community. And of course, in a few months, ran out of money, had to figure something else out. Between the hustle and different things, I was able to basically pull together a few dollars, but it just wasn't enough. So I kept doing well at work and achieving major milestones, getting recognized for different achievements, getting huge bonuses, until, one day my then manager, who was, she's my biggest mentor and the person I give credit to a lot of my success professionally. She's also Caucasian. She was an expatriate. And she started to groom me. And I knew that both of us would be able to achieve more, but you don't have line of sight to it in the moment. Anyway, after working for about a year or so in my new dream role, she called me in her office one day and said she was getting promoted and she was going to become a regional vice president over not just Jamaica, but other countries across the globe. And she needed to backfill her position. And long story short, I became the first, the youngest, first non-expatriate at the time to become a vice president in a US Fortune 500 company. And that company today is Xerox. And of course, I started to earn even more money, which was the sweet part. So I kept pushing savings, ramped up the savings, and within a year, I was able to start back the house. And as I was progressing in starting the house, I knew I had enough to get to a certain point, but I didn't have enough to finish it. And that always bothered me. But God, I can rely on God to intervene when I need him the most. And something happened in the Jamaican foreign exchange market. And the US dollar, because I was earning in US, so I was saving in US, it depreciated by 100 and odd percent almost overnight. It went from 30 to about 70 odd, which meant I would almost triple whatever it is that I had saved. So I cashed in on that opportunity, increased my savings dramatically, and now I had enough money to finish the house when I wanted and how I wanted. And, throughout the journey of building that house, which it took a few years, there were times when I said to myself, you know what, Odetta, you don't have to build a house that's so big enough. You could cut back and finish it. But to me, I would be betraying my goal to a certain extent. I had 8 family members in my extended family, and each of them needed a bedroom. So at age 25, we were able to move in, myself and my extended family, into that house. The house was 6,000 square feet, 9 bedroom. It had a huge kitchen, multiple living areas. And again, the picture of the house is in the book and the details, so I won't go into that. But for a dream that was established at 11 years old, fermented with the birth of my son, and executed by age 25, I felt a lot of pride. But let me tell you where my heart completely shattered. When I took my grandfather, now think about coming from an old, bored, dilapidated house, and I took my grandfather and I took him into his now bedroom in this nice concrete structure that I don't think any of them even thought I would be able to build it. I think I was probably talking up my game. And, he looked around at me and there were no words, just tears. And that's when I realized that my life was to be one of bringing tears of joy and helping people to achieve more, which is why I created GOFFAH. So that's the journey, shortened significantly. I mean, in the book, I talk about all the different areas and all the drama that happened, but in summary, I believe I answered the question, Kshema.
Yes, you did. I mean, and some. But you know what I want to ask you though, Odetta, a successful career woman pulling in US 6 figures salary from age 25 while living in Jamaica. Did this actually bring any unwarranted scrutiny of your finances, especially by the relevant authorities? Just see this young woman making moves and going.
There's a lesson in my book that's called Don't Judge, Don't Hate. And the content from that lesson came from all the judgment and hate that I experienced in my life because of my accomplishments and people not understanding it. Now, I have forgiven and I don't hold any animosity, because let me tell you something. Being outside looking in, this little girl from country, pregnant twice before 17, didn't graduate from high school, drop out of college, and by age 25, it's a 6,000 square feet house. I too would probably raise eyebrows in doubt in terms of where exactly is that money coming from to fund it. So that's why people who hate and judge, I don't have anything against them. Sometimes it's ignorance, and sometimes it's just how we were cultured. But let me tell you something, from people in my own community reporting me to the authorities, because back then drug mules were popular, right? And taking up drugs to the US, because I was traveling so much for work, people assumed that that's what I was doing. And they reported me to the authorities numerous times. I know I was being investigated because somebody told me that my tax records were being requested. Somebody probably who shouldn't have told me that, shared that with me. And then the police actually showed up at the house and invaded our privacy, made a big scene, but we had nothing to hide. So we accommodated them. So when you're outside looking in, it's hard to see that this can be legitimate. But of course, when they did their homework and look at the taxes I was paying, it was obvious that I was earning the kind of income that could generate what it is that I was doing. But in addition to that, I've been reported locked up in jail, and
Wow.
people have just exhibit. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kshema.
No, I was saying, wow, continue.
Yeah, people have just exhibited so much hate towards me in different ways, whether it's trying to assassinate my character, reporting me to the authorities, just being devious in their daily lives, and just even attacking me openly and publicly because of hate. But the people who knew, and that to me is all that matters. Everything else was noise. And this is why, when people talk about hate on social media and judgment, it pales into comparison to considering what I have been through in terms of the toxicity of hate. And I expand on it in my book, but it came in droves. But what it did was it fueled me, because here is my belief. If people are not hating you, you're not doing something right. Hate and judgment, they're both inevitable if you are on the road to success. Whether
Absolutely.
you are the CEO in a Fortune 500, the windscreen wiper on the street corners, the vendor, the host on the radio program, as long as you're making progress in life, people are going to hate you. They're going to judge you. Get used to it. Figure out a way to use it as ammunition. So sometimes when I'm not feeling any hate, I have to wonder, if me I drop off of my game or nothing now come. When you start perceiving it that way, nothing surprises you. And that's where I'm at now as it pertains to just hate and judgment.
Now, via your social media and in your book, you shared a pie chart of your budget reflecting your income and expenditure. How detrimental is financial ignorance to our culture, even for persons who are making a significant amount of it?
When I was writing the book, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who is a banker. And she said, if you really give people this information and they use it, you realize that most people will be able to figure out how to be free financially, right? And what I try to do with my book is not just tell a story, but I give the tools, the strategy, and the roadmap. And this is why I had to put my budget to show this is how I decided to spend every dollar that I earned, or to save and invest every dollar that I earned. To answer your question, financial literacy is critical. If we can achieve a certain amount of financial independence through discipline, just understanding how things move. I talk about bonds and investment in my book. Talk about different ways that you can generate income. I talk about your liabilities because, for example, I don't believe that my savings should pay for my vehicle, because the minute my vehicle drives off the lot, it's a liability. I believe my investments should pay for that vehicle. And that's what I want, the mindset of people. My stepson right now is at the point where, he's trying to decide, what do I do next? And a friend of mine, her daughter, we agreed, let's go ahead, get her an apartment. She wanted a car, buy an apartment with that money, collect the rent, which is $100,000, pay $50,000 for the mortgage, and take the remaining $50,000 and pay for the car note. So now you have an asset. Your asset is paying for your liability, and it continues to appreciate in value. That's what I teach in the book. And let me tell you, understanding that is the difference between being trapped in a job or a situation that makes you unhappy to being free to explore and live a life of greatness.
Wow. Now, many Jamaicans, though, Odetta, are unable to take full advantage of globalization due to their personal circumstances. Do you think the aim of e-commerce platforms such as your brainchild, GOFFAH Global, can help to stimulate success in our society?
I am confident it will. Now, like everything else, there's a learning curve. We launched, we're now in pilot, but we're moved. Products are being sold, people are earning commission. But what I wanted to create with GOFFAH, and we did it with our capable and competent team, is a platform that would allow anyone, the disenfranchised, the person with a disability, the person who is not educated, every single one of those persons can share a positive experience with someone. Whether it's saying, listen, I bought Odetta's book. It's a good book. I think you should buy it. And when they share it, they make $5 to $10 for each book. Or, you know what? I've seen this phone on GOFFAH, and I know you are looking for a phone. And by sharing the phone with the person who shares it is able to earn a commission. And we're not talking about peanuts for commission. As I just said, it's $5 to $10 for the book. So by enabling and giving people an opportunity to earn when they recommend, whether it's groceries, which we're going to put on the platform, hardware supplies, vehicles, whatever can be sold on GOFFAH. If you say, use the service and use it from GOFFAH, and you earn tangible income from doing that, everybody and their mother can do that. And I believe that although e-commerce platforms aren't where they should be in terms of penetration in Jamaica, there's a learning curve, but I have every confidence that we're going to get there. And I've decided, this is why I retired at age 42, to dedicate my life to getting people to that place where they can earn, whether it's on the side or eventually full-time, a lucrative income doing something that comes naturally to them, which is to refer a product.
Wow. Now, your self-help memoir, No Regrets, Just Lessons, Odetta Rockhead, Unedited, is a success strategy and mindset changer that carries lessons instead of chapters. Now, though the path we take on the road to success is different, in your opinion, what aspects of our lives should we strive to master to achieve greatness?
The 12 lessons in the book are all the things that I personally had to focus on to achieve my greatness, right? I had to make peace with my past. I had to be comfortable with who I am, and it continues. But I would say the primary character trait that we must develop to achieve greatness is self-love. Because when you love yourself, and this is another lesson in that book, it turns, and I'm referring to myself now, it turns a dysfunctional little girl into an unstoppable woman. Because you build up that level of confidence, you develop integrity, you learn to forgive, and you develop a drive that makes you unstoppable. So that to me is the first one. The second one is just to be comfortable with who you are, no matter where you came from, whether it's the old board house with the dilapidated flooring boards, or it's the garrison, or it's no matter where you came from, be proud of it, embrace it, and use it as a pillar to propel your success. And the last one that I would say is to embrace spirituality. And it doesn't mean you need to be religious.
but there's always something else happening in that equation. And for me, it's God. For other people, they may call it the universe, they may call it Allah. It can be anything. I'm not here to tell you how and what you should choose to inspire you. But spirituality gives you faith, it allows you to believe, and you become fearless. Because when you stop fearing things like death, there's nothing stopping you from achieving your greatness.
You know, I wanted you to drop some gems, especially for the next generation who is living in the show and tell era of social media. What advice would you give to the next generation?
Well, two things. What you see online, 90% of it isn't true. I'm sharing the highlights of my life. I'm not sharing the ups and downs that are similar to yours. You know, there's a thing that I like to say is that if we all take our problems and put them in a pile, likely you're going to pull out your problem because you realize that everybody else's problem worse than yours. In navigating the social media hemisphere, learn to be grateful. Accept what it is that you have for exactly what it is, because gratitude makes everything enough. Dismiss the sense of entitlement. You're not entitled to anything. You need to get into the habit of working for what you have, because money without any work, or let me say, money without morality means nothing. In every greatness, there has to be goodness. You cannot expect things to be laid out to you without hard work. So, in summary, don't believe what you see online. You are not the worst out there. Your problems are not the worst. People online are having them too. Dismiss the sense of entitlement and be grateful, because gratitude makes everything enough.
Of all your accomplishments, Odetta, what are you most proud of?
Wow. Well, I don't know if I can give you one. So, seeing my family now, like every time I go and visit in the family house, knowing that the next hurricane won't leave us hopeless. So I'm very proud of that house, and I'm very proud that I was able to achieve most of my life goals by age 25. But I believe what I'm most proud of is just the fact that I've been able to help a lot of people to rise and to help them to experience their own greatness, whether it's through job creation, whether it's through just building relationships with them and helping them over the years. And this is why every single person who owns a copy of the book will have access to me for 12 months in workshop sessions, because I want to continue on the mission of just helping people to rise. Because if you are growing and rising and you're not helping others to do it, you're not deserving of it.
You know, let's get into matters of the heart now. As you entered, and you speak about this in your book, as you entered the final phase of your first marriage, did you at any point lost hope in saying that would you ever find true love?
You see how I was raised? I was raised to believe that everything was possible, right? So I have always had the philosophy, just like any other goal, if I try and I fail, I need to try again. I was prepared, and probably still am. My husband is not going to be happy to hear this, but I was prepared to get married as many times as was necessary until I got it right. I knew that God had ordained a man out there for me, and it was only a matter of time before I would find him. And yes, I found him late in life, but guess what? I found him. So there were absolutely no thoughts of I would never find love or anything like that, because I was willing to do trial and error until I did.
Now, on the heels of Mother's Day, and happy Mother's Day when it comes on Sunday, what's your proudest moment as a mother?
Oh So my proudest moment as a mother was when a few years ago, my son decided to drop out of UTech and to pursue music. And, you know, he did follow through eventually, and I'm grateful for that, especially considering what that decision caused us, which probably is gonna be book 2. But what I was proud of was when I went to my son and I said, you cannot drop out of UTech to pursue music because it's not stable, it's not guaranteed. And I said, why don't you have music as a backup plan and finish your education? And he said to me, Mommy, you have taught me so many things. And one thing that you have taught me is my backup plan or my plan B will only distract from my plan A. If I have music as my plan B and school as my plan A, I won't give it everything. But if I have music as my plan A, there's nothing to distract from it. For me, that was all the lessons that I've been trying to teach this boy and use back on me to his convenience. And what could I say? When you say, Mommy, you teach me that my plan B will distract from my plan A, I have to shut up my mouth and say, okay, I teach you that. All right, let's do music for a few years. So my proudest moment is the fact that he listened to me and he always tried to do his best. He's a very, as country people, that's a manageable child and very respectful. And again, he's my wife.
Now, in all we do, service is important, but how vital is it for a great leader to possess the trait of a humanitarian?
In my book, I talk a lot about leading with heart. And there's a chart that I created in the book that shows that people is, you know, I have 5 P's, right? Every organization, whether it's government, a company, or just life in general, it has some stakeholders that are important. Whether they're trying to make money, whether they're trying to win businesses, clients, whatever it is, the bottom line is that without people, none of those things are possible. So for me, taking care of people, being a humanitarian, giving back in every way I possibly can was paramount. When I reflect on my success, do you think I think it's because I was any smarter than anybody else? No, it's because I had some people who were behind me. They respected me and I respected them in return. They propelled me towards my greatness. So I think people development, leading with heart, being a humanitarian is, life is not fulfilling if that's not a part of your equilibrium.
No regrets, just lessons. I know it is available on Amazon, but can you tell us where we can get our very own copy? Is it available in local bookstores? Where can we get it?
It is. So it is available on Amazon and it's available there in the paperback, ebook, and in a few weeks, audiobook. The audiobook is already available on Kobo, and so is the ebook. In Jamaica, it's available at Fontana Pharmacy. It's available at urban bookstores. It's available at a few smaller outlets to include SSMC, Spry Fitness. It's available at Just Ship It, and there are a few other places where you can get it. But primarily, you can get it on GOFFAH. It costs less on GOFFAH than it does everywhere else. And if you are local, it will be delivered in 2 days. If you're overseas, it can be 3 to 10 days, depending on where you are. And you get it packaged nicely in a box. If you go to my Instagram page, you'll see the packaging. But we ensure that it's available everywhere so people can access it and make it available to them.
Can we give our listeners a treat? I would really love if you are able to do a book giveaway, because your book is an absolute gem. I have started reading, and trust me, with your words, you were able to paint the picture and somehow in my head also capture the sounds as I'm going through the pages. So what do you say to a giveaway?
It would be a pleasure.
Well, I have said it a number of times throughout the interview, so I will say the first caller with the correct answer to this question will get their very own copy of Odetta Rockhead Kerr's book, No Regrets, just I'm not going to finish the rest of it. But here's your question. Really easy, because we truly want you to win and get a copy of this gem. What is the title of Odetta Rockhead Kerr's book? First person to call, the numbers are 974-5051, 974-5043, or 618-0352. And of course, you put 876 in front of the numbers. First caller with the correct answer to the question, the book is yours. Pretty much. Thank you so much for doing that. And as we basically put a cap on this conversation, based on your experiences, your challenges, your struggles, and overcoming, what would you say are the ingredients to attain success?
I would say the primary ingredient is self-belief. If you don't believe that you are capable of it, that you are deserving of it, you're going to struggle to claim it. And to believe in self, you first have to love self. You have to be comfortable with who you are. A lot of us have been through a lot. I mean, I don't begin to talk about all the things I've been through. They're all in the book. But you also have to make peace with those things that probably would break the average person. And in doing so, pray, talk to God, appeal to Him, not just when you're in need, but do so when you're grateful, and keep your head level and always focused on the goal.
Wow, you are super awesome. Thank you so much for sharing and being so open and raw and real. And I know that our listeners are truly appreciative of your story. The messages via our WhatsApp line are coming in fast and furious. I will be talking about reading some of their messages. But thank you so much, Odetta Rockhead Kerr. I mean, this was fantastic.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Kshema, and listeners for listening to me.
There you have it. Road to Success, the journey. And look here, it is a success story indeed.
It may only be another minute,
and we already have a winner. So we're saying congratulations to Carleen Hunningham from Patrick City in Kingston.